Should esports count as high school and college sports? First things first, we got a new set. We'll actually be changing out some of the objects from week to week, so if you have any suggestions for things that I should put back there, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, let's get back into it. I probably don't need to tell you that esports are a really big deal. League of Legends Worlds are happening right now in Korea, and there's $1 million on the line for the top team. Dota 2's The International had more than $15 million in its prize pool. Even the prestigious Grey Lady has declared that esports are finally here. And that's a good sign. Unfortunately, not everyone's convinced. Sports figureheads like Brian Gumbel and the head of ESPN protest that esports are not actually sports. And all this despite the fact that Limp Bizkit, yes, Limp Bizkit's lead guitarist played at last year's championship. But seriously, the United States Visa Department already recognizes League of Legends as a professional sport.
The United States government recognizes League of Legends pro players as professional athletes and award visas to essentially work in the United States under that title.
And Robert Morris University, Illinois recently began offering scholarships to League of Legends players. So clearly there's something going on. And I was wondering, should esports become an official part of high school and collegiate life? Me personally, I would have jumped at the opportunity to learn to play a game like Quake in high school, but maybe that's only because I was cut from football, basketball, and baseball my freshman year. Now, not everyone agrees that esports are sports. Esports barely nudged out competitive eating in a Reddit poll asking people what activities they consider to be sports. And this is on Reddit of all places. So what is a sport anyway? The widely held definition of sports, and by widely held I mean on Wikipedia, is that sports are competitive, organized, skill-based, and physical. Those last two are really important. A game like football has high skill and high physicality requirements, so everyone thinks it's a sport. Chess, on the other hand, has high skill but almost no physicality, so most people don't consider it a sport. Esports occupy this strange liminal space where they're athletic in a lot of different ways, but just not in the full body doing a triathlon sense. And I admit, it's a little bit hard for me to think about League of Legends being nearly as strenuous as even the least challenging winter sport. Curling, I'm looking at you. But if you think about it, sports are more than just bodily exertion. If phys ed class was just about the physical part, then we would just make kids do vertical push-ups and that crazy rope thing from CrossFit. I'd argue that development as a human being is the biggest, most important part of sports. They make us better at other facets of our lives. Daniel H. Bowen and Colin Hitt of The Atlantic have written that schools that are better at athletics perform better on tests because success in sports requires focus and dedication. And esports are a horn of plenty when it comes to stuff like this. If you think that esports is just staying up every night playing Call of Duty, you're totally wrong. The top League of Legends teams train gruelingly. Team Dignitas, for example, practices 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. They draw up plays on a dry erase board and watch 4 hours of replays every single day. This isn't any less training or work than any other professional athlete. And esports such as League of Legends have a huge emphasis on teamwork. You play with specific characters to fulfill specific roles, and if you don't work together with perfect timing and coordination, you're gonna get stomped.
Oh, green team's got a face stick straight into it. Where's the focus?
You need the same amount of skill, coordination, and teamwork in esports to compete at a high level. As the writer Bethlehem Scholes has written, order isn't something that can be decided on in advance. It's a puzzle to be solved, drawing on the collective resources of the group. He was talking about basketball, but he might as well have been talking about League of Legends, right? And esports is incredibly competitive. They have to learn to perform under just as much pressure as any athlete.
Now he's winning other lanes for him. There's a fight breaking out.
So while it might not be the most physically taxing of endeavors, maybe esports do deserve a place alongside other sports in that trophy case. Because esports imparts similar values and lessons that help you become better at life. Some of you are probably saying, who cares? I don't need some high school or college coach to make esports a real thing for me. Esports are clearly doing fine without it. Now this is kind of true, but North America does frequently get stomped in international competition, and this is in no small part due to the culture of esports in this country. Another concern is whether public institutions should be putting all their eggs in one basket with private companies. Here's what I mean. The NFL doesn't own the sport of football, just like FIFA doesn't own the sport of soccer, but League of Legends is owned by Riot Games. And that could be a problem. What if Riot goes bankrupt, for example? What happens to all the money that high schools and colleges spend? Or if Riot decides to permanently change the game somehow?
Welcome to Ultra Rapid Fire.
Athletic departments would have no recourse. These are very serious questions. But whatever you think about whether or not esports are real sports or how you personally define what sports are, it's more than just a semantic debate. Think about what the things are that you value in real sports. It's about dedication, hard work, pushing yourself, working as a team, and a commitment to improving your abilities. All of which is just as present in esports. Besides, if being physical is so important, then all we need to do to fix esports is just put the players on omnidirectional treadmills. Problem solved. So what do you think? Should educational institutions support esports the same way that they support other sports? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I'll see you next week. Last week we talked about why Mario's jump felt so good. Let's see what you had to say. Johannes Laser Freetime wrote, "I would not say it is Mario that makes us jump so much in games. I would rather say it is the sensation of jumping that compels us to do it." That is the most poetic comment of the year. Joseph Hall Patton argues that the prominence of jumping in video games is more of a necessity of 2D movement. But if you look at the early days of games, that wasn't necessarily the most direct path. I mean, there were other games that had 2D movement that didn't use jumping. So a game like Galaga, for example, where you're a spaceship, or a game like Defender, which kind of has this vaguely isometric point of view, so which has you kind of moving up and down over the screen. So I think it's only proof of how influential Mario's jump was, how good that jump felt, that side scrollers are such a dominant form, a dominant game genre that we know today. Tales from iDeath, that's a very spooky username. This person says that if we're going to talk about how awesome jumping is in games, then we need to also take a look at when jumping sucks and when jumping doesn't feel right. This concept of game feel that I alluded to in the video, it takes Tales from iDeath out of the experience. It's interesting, we didn't really get into it in the episode, but if you look at jumping in other video games, specifically first-person shooters, the idea of how high you jump and how that's supposed to feel in the context of that game universe is incredibly important in terms of making you feel like you're a part of it, making you feel like you're sort of in this moment. So yeah, excellent comment. Gotcha Ponky asks, how big of an obstacle one would need to jump over to get featured in the comments? I would say roughly a little bit taller than the chair that Bill Gates jumps over. Yeah. As a general rule, you should be able to jump higher than a billionaire.